Kendrick Mosley just wanted a quiet afternoon by the pool, but when two officers showed up questioning his right to be there, a silent neighbor hit record. And nothing in their community would be the same again. Sunday afternoons meant something to Kendrick Mosley, not because they were quiet or relaxing or even predictable, but because they were his. That small sliver of time after the rush of deadlines and before the work week hit again was sacred. It was when he could breathe, think, just exist. He slipped on his flip-flops, grabbed his stainless steel thermos filled with iced hibiscus tea, tucked his dog-eared copy of The Spook Who Sat by the Door under his arm, and walked the short path from his townhouse to the pool. The air in Marietta, Georgia, had that late summer thickness, but the breeze made it tolerable. Kendrick loved the walk, past trimmed hedges, past the same tired no loud music sign, past the patch of lawn where the neighborhood kids left their neon water guns. He found a chair near the deep end and settled in. For 20 minutes, nothing happened. He read, he sipped, he adjusted his sunglasses and tried not to think about Monday. Then he noticed the black and white patrol SUV crawling past the gate, slowing down, backing up. Two officers stepped out. They didn't walk with urgency, but with that bored kind of purpose, like they already knew who they were coming for. Kendrick's shoulders tensed. He sat up straight, closing his book softly. "Afternoon," the taller one said, hand resting on his belt. "Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Kendrick blinked. "I live here, just enjoying the pool." "Can we see your ID?" the other officer asked. He had pale skin, sharp features, and the kind of face that didn't blink often. Kendrick reached into his bag. "Sure, I've got my keycard too. Is there a problem?" "We got a call," said the taller one, Officer Trent Halley. "Someone reported a suspicious individual hanging around the pool area." Kendrick handed over his driver's license and community-issued keycard. "Suspicious how?" Halley didn't answer. Instead, he passed the card to his partner, Corporal Bryce Fenwick, who examined it like he'd never seen plastic before. Fenwick looked up. "You said you live here. Which unit?" 412B. Bought it in April. I've got my deed at home if you want to walk over." Fenwick raised an eyebrow. 412B, huh? That's not usually the profile we see for that address. Kendrick caught the tone. He'd heard it before. Polite words carrying an accusation like a brick in a box. He exhaled through his nose. "Look, officers, I'm not trying to make trouble. I'm just out here reading. That's it." Halley flipped through a little notepad. "You got any guests? Anyone else supposed to be meeting you here?" "No, just me." There was a pause. One of those long silences where nobody says what they're really thinking. From the second-floor balcony of the building across the courtyard, someone watched. Tessa Brindley leaned slightly against the railing, phone in hand, thumb hovering over the record button. She knew Kendrick. They weren't best friends, but they spoke often enough, mostly about their dogs, traffic on Roswell Road, and which Thai place actually delivered on time. She didn't like the way those cops were standing. Too close, too casual with their questioning. Fenwick handed the key card back, slowly. "All right, just doing our job." But he didn't leave. He looked around like he was still waiting for Kendrick to mess up somehow. "You understand, right?" Halley added. "It's not about you. We just have to check when we get calls." Kendrick stood up. "I understand you're here because someone thought I didn't belong." Nobody answered that. But down the street, another neighbor walked her golden retriever past the pool gate and barely got a glance. Kendrick didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice or flex his rights the way some might expect from someone in his shoes. He'd learned long ago that the louder he got, the less people listened. So he stayed measured. Still standing now, he looked Officer Halley square in the eye. "Let me ask something. Did the caller say what I was doing that made them uncomfortable?" Halley scratched at his neck. "They just said there was a man they didn't recognize, sitting by the pool. Looked like he didn't live here. No mention of threats, arguments, any kind of disturbance?" "No." "Then I'm just a guy sitting by the water, reading a book and sipping tea." Corporal Fenwick clicked his pen. "Sir, we don't make the calls. We just respond. And right now, we're responding." Kendrick kept his hands visible, his voice steady. I understand. But what I'm saying is that I've lived here for months. I've paid my dues like everyone else. If someone can call the cops on me for that, then what exactly am I allowed to do? The air between them grew tight. Fenwick took a step closer. You don't need to get defensive. Kendrick didn't move. I'm not being defensive. I'm being real. All right, sir. Hallie interrupted. Let's not escalate things. Can you confirm for us again? Do you live alone? Anyone else in the residence? Kendrick exhaled slowly. I live with my sister. She works nights, won't be home until this evening. No guests, no noise, nothing illegal. Just trying to enjoy the place I pay for. Fenwick wrote something in his notepad. Didn't say what. Then he circled back. Can you take us to the unit? Kendrick blinked. Right now, if you don't mind. He did mind. But he also knew what might happen if he said no. From her balcony, Tessa pressed record. She couldn't hear everything, but she saw Kendrick's body language. Calm, still, but clearly tired of this back and forth. She zoomed in slightly. One of the officers was standing far too close, invading his space in that slow, deliberate way that felt more about dominance than safety. Mom? Her teenage daughter called from inside. Hang on, Tessa said without turning around. I need to film this. Back at the pool, Kendrick shook his head. I'm not comfortable letting you into my home when I haven't done anything wrong. That landed like a challenge. Fenwick squinted. Then how do we know you really live there? Kendrick pointed to his ID. Because my name matches the address. Because I showed you my pool access card. And because I know how many damn parking spaces come with the unit. Hallie shifted his weight. Look, you seem like a reasonable guy. Let's just be clear. We're trying to verify your presence. That's it. No one's accusing you of anything. But you are, Kendrick said. You just won't say it outright. That stung. Hallie's mouth tightened, but he said nothing. Then, from across the courtyard, another voice rang out. He lives there. Everyone turned. Tessa, now standing at the edge of her balcony, held up her phone. He lives here. That's Kendrick Mosley, Unit 412B. I see him walking his dog every morning at 6:30. He's lived here since April. The two officers hesitated. Ma'am, please stay on your property. Fenwick called up. I am on my property, she snapped back, and I'm filming this because I've seen enough of these videos to know how they end. Kendrick glanced up at her and gave the smallest nod of thanks. That moment, the neighbor, the camera, the exposure, it changed the energy. Hallie's tone softened. All right, Mr. Mosley, I think we're good here. Appreciate your cooperation. But Kendrick didn't answer. He sat back down in his chair, picked up his book, and stared at the open page without reading a word. The officers stood there for a few more awkward seconds before heading back toward their SUV. As they pulled away, Kendrick leaned back and closed his eyes. But his afternoon was already over, and as the sun pressed on, so did the questions burning at the edge of his patience. Tessa Brindley stayed at her balcony rail longer than she meant to. She watched the patrol SUV drive slowly toward the exit gate, then paused, watching the officers speak through the cracked window before finally rolling out of sight. It took a minute before the sound of tires over the gravel faded entirely. Only then did she lower her phone. Inside, her daughter, Mira, peeked around the doorway. Why were you filming them? Tessa turned, still holding her phone like it was fragile. Because things like that don't always end well. And if something had happened, I wasn't going to be the neighbor who just didn't see anything. Mira frowned. But nothing happened, right? Tessa paused. That doesn't mean it was okay. Down by the pool, Kendrick sat still. No phone, no music. Just him and the book he was no longer reading. From up high, he looked small in the sun's glare, like a man forced to perform calmness just to keep the peace. She'd seen him plenty of times, walking that goofy pit mix he had, grabbing his mail in slippers, sometimes chatting with Mr. Fry from the end unit about lawn fertilizer like two retirees. The man had a routine. He fit in. But today he'd been marked. Tessa scrolled back through the video she'd taken. There wasn't much sound, but the visual told enough. Kendrick standing stiff, arms controlled. The two officers hovering close, one writing, the other crowding him. The kind of scene that didn't need volume to explain itself. She tapped save and backed it up to the cloud, just in case. Meanwhile, Kendrick was still at the pool, but he wasn't relaxing. He stared at the same sentence in his book for several minutes before finally shutting it and packing up his things. His muscles ached in a strange way, not from exertion, but from holding in too much. He wasn't angry exactly. Not yet. What he felt was more like that slow burn when your dignity is poked too many times in too short a span. Like someone tapping your head again and again until it stops being annoying and becomes a kind of violence. He walked back toward his unit, avoiding eye contact with the couple chatting by the tennis courts. They'd definitely seen the cops. Didn't say a word. Inside, the air conditioning kicked on with a soft click. He set down his bag and went to the kitchen, poured what was left of his iced tea over the sink, and just stood there, quiet. After a moment, he pulled out his phone. 2 messages from his sister, Alina Mosley, asking how the pool was. 1 missed call from a number he didn't recognize, probably the HOA again. He ignored both. Then the knock came. Not a pounding, just 3 taps. Polite but sharp. He checked the peephole. It was Tessa. He hesitated, then opened the door. She didn't wait for him to speak. I recorded everything. I figured you might want it. Kendrick blinked, unsure for a second. Seriously? Yeah, she said, handing him her phone. I thought they were pushing too hard. You didn't do anything, and they wouldn't let it go. It didn't sit right. He played the video, watched himself stand there, uncomfortable but composed, watched the officer's body language, watched how close they got. When it ended, he looked up. Thank you. Really? Tessa shrugged. You shouldn't need someone watching you just to be treated like a neighbor. There was a pause between them. Then she added, if you ever need someone to back you up with the HOA or file a report or anything, I'm here. Kendrick looked at her, really looked, and gave a slow nod. Appreciate that. He didn't say much else. Not then, but the gesture planted something in him. Something that had been buried under layers of tolerance and resignation. Tessa walked back toward her unit, and Kendrick stood at his door for a few extra seconds, holding her phone like it weighed more than it should. But just because the moment passed didn't mean he was ready to let it go. Kendrick didn't sleep much that night. He lay in bed with his eyes open, arms folded behind his head, listening to the slow tick of the wall clock he hated but hadn't replaced. The house was still. No traffic, no neighbors arguing through paper-thin walls, just silence and the echo of the day playing on repeat. He kept seeing Fenwick's face, that slow lean-in, the tone of his voice, the way he'd looked at Kendrick like he wasn't a homeowner or a resident or a professional man who designed hospital interfaces for a living, but just some intruder near water. But what bothered Kendrick more was that he'd seen it coming. The truth is, the signs had been piling up since he closed on the townhouse. He just didn't want to admit it. Like the email from the HOA a few weeks in. Reminder to all residents, please avoid propping open shared gates for guests. It landed in his inbox the day after he'd held the gate open for a delivery driver and was spotted by Mr. Irwin, who didn't even say hello. Or the way some neighbors pulled their kids a little closer when Kendrick walked by with his dog, Bruno. A sweet, clumsy rescue who was more likely to chase butterflies than people. He'd caught one dad subtly recording him on his phone as he waited outside the leasing office for a package. And the garbage bin thing. That one stung. Every Thursday, the HOA sent notices about improperly stored trash cans. After 3 of them, each time when Kendrick's bin had been tucked neatly against the wall, he knocked on the office door and asked to see the photo evidence. The manager fumbled through a binder and showed him a grainy picture of someone else's unit. Completely different number. No apology. Just, we'll update the file. It was all small, maybe. Harmless if you looked at it in isolation. But not when it keeps happening. He got up from bed and opened his laptop. The glow stung his eyes, but he didn't care. He started organizing files, sorting screenshots, HOA email, photos of his clean patio after bogus complaints. That text from the landscaping crew who once told him they were asked to double-check his side yard, even though no one else had been questioned. He clicked open a folder labeled Pool Incident, RAW, and transferred Tessa's video to it. Then he created a second folder, Pattern. This wasn't about one afternoon. It hadn't been for a while. At around 2 a.m., Alina came home from her nursing shift. She found her brother at the kitchen table, typing. She dropped her keys in the bowl and rubbed the back of her neck. "You're up late." Kendrick didn't look up. Couldn't sleep. She stepped closer and saw the open video on the screen. "Oh," she said softly. "It happened again." He nodded. She leaned on the counter and folded her arms. "This one worse than the trash notices?" He let out a half laugh. "2 officers showed up today. Said I looked suspicious sitting by the pool. Didn't believe I lived here. Pressed me for ID, asked to come into the unit." Alina closed her eyes and muttered, "God,